It was supposed to be just a fun midnight chat, a friendly stop on Leanne Morgan's comedy tour. What she got instead was a verbal ambush disguised as an interview. In less than 10 minutes, what began as casual banter twisted into a battle of wit and willpower, live on national television. Each question hit like a knife, each answer sharper than the last. By the time the final words were spoken, Andy's smirk was gone. The audience sat frozen, and Leanne Morgan had done what no one ever dared on Watch What Happens Live. She stopped Andy Cohen cold and walked off before he could even recover. Trust me, this talk show won't disappoint you. It'll be worth every second of your time. The lights hit the stage and the familiar music of Watch What Happens Live kicked in. Leanne Morgan stepped out from the wings with that unmistakable Southern warmth, waving at the audience with that warm, Tennessee smile that had carried her through a lifetime of comedy tours and PTA fundraisers. Andy Cohen met her halfway, cocktail in hand, with a grin. "Leanne Morgan," he said, dragging out her name like a headline. "America's favorite Southern mom, still teaching us how to laugh through menopause and mediocrity?" Leanne laughed, but there was a flicker behind her eyes. "Well, bless your heart, Andy. You'd be surprised how much material I get from men who think they're being funny." The audience cracked up, but Andy didn't flinch. He thrived on this, turning sweetness into sparks. "So, Leanne," he said, crossing one leg, tone suddenly casual but pointed, "do your jokes come with a warning label for modern audiences? You know, something like, may contain outdated gender roles and casseroles." The laughter this time was thinner. Leanne smiled, steady and unshaken. "If honesty's outdated, then I guess I'm vintage sugar." Andy leaned in, eyebrows raised. "You've built your brand on being a wife, a mom, a church-going woman from Tennessee. Don't you ever feel boxed in? Like maybe your jokes only work for people who still have landlines?" Leanne's smile didn't fade, but her voice dropped a notch. "You'd be amazed how many people with landlines still pay for cable, Andy." That got a real laugh. Andy sipped his drink slowly. "Touché. But seriously, you don't worry people see your act as safe? Maybe even boring?" "The world's moved on, you know," Leanne tilted her head. "Moved on from what? Husbands who forget birthdays? Kids who can't do laundry? I guess real life got canceled while I was raising mine." Andy smirked. "No, real life just got a little more inclusive. Maybe people want more than jokes about casseroles and carpool lines." Leanne's reply came soft, but sharp enough. "Funny, for someone who talks about inclusion, you sure sound like you're trying to exclude me." The air thickened. Andy tried to recover, still smiling, but his tone edged toward condescension. "Hey, I'm just saying, comedy evolves. Don't you ever feel pressure to evolve with it?" Leanne leaned forward, hands folded, voice calm but deliberate. "I evolve every time I wake up, Andy. I just don't mistake being loud for being brave. There's a difference." Andy chuckled, a low, practiced sound. "So you don't see a problem with making jokes about marriage and motherhood while the rest of the world's trying to break free from those stereotypes?" Leanne's voice cut through the tension like a slow southern drawl dipped in ice. "Honey, if being proud of my life offends someone, that says more about their insecurities than my punchlines." He blinked, caught off guard. The camera zoomed in just as she added, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, "And don't worry, Andy, you don't have to get my jokes." They weren't written for people who confuse irony with insight. The tension that had been simmering finally started to boil. Andy leaned forward in his chair, elbows resting on his knees, his tone dropping from friendly host to cross-examiner. "Don't you think your comedy leaves people out? You know, people who don't fit your idea of family?" Leanne blinked once, then smiled thinly. "I don't draw lines, Andy," she said. "You do, when you assume laughter has rules." He raised an eyebrow. "Come on, Leanne. The people you don't joke about, are they just not funny enough? Or do they just not fit the story you want to tell?" Her hands folded neatly in her lap. The warmth in her voice vanished. "Don't mistake kindness for cowardice," she said evenly. "I talk about what I live, not what I label." Andy chuckled, but it came out tight. You know what that sounds like? Nostalgia dressed up as virtue. A little too comfortable for a world that's moved on. Leanne leaned forward, eyes narrowing just slightly. And cynicism dressed up as progress, she shot back. You've made a career out of confusing cruelty for courage. The room froze. The audience didn't laugh, didn't breathe. Andy's grin faltered for the first time, the air in the studio thick enough to cut. The playful banter that had filled the set minutes ago was gone, replaced by something sharper, heavier. Andy tried to hold her stare, but Leanne didn't blink. Her voice softened, but her words hit like a punch. You asked for honesty, Andy. I just didn't realize you wanted it in headlines. The smiles were gone now. Andy Cohen leaned back in his chair, shaking his head slightly, his trademark smirk returning just enough to look like confidence. Let's drop the polite act, shall we? He said, his tone low, edged with amusement. Traditional values. You really believe that still means something in 2025? Leanne didn't hesitate. It does to anyone who's ever fought to hold a family together. Andy's brows lifted, his voice turning surgical. Or to anyone afraid of change? Leanne's laugh was short, humorless. Afraid? Andy, I've raised 3 kids through chaos. You want to talk about fear? Try explaining TikTok to a menopausal woman with a Wi-Fi problem. The audience burst out laughing, nervous, grateful for the break in tension. But the relief didn't last. Her tone shifted again, firmer, grounded. You talk about empathy, Andy, she said, eyes locked on him. But you use it like a weapon. You don't ask questions. You set traps. Andy blinked, visibly thrown off for a beat. Then he straightened, forcing a casual chuckle. You sound defensive. Leanne's voice dropped to a calm so controlled it cut through the silence. I sound tired, she said. Tired of being told that loving my family makes me small-minded. The air grew still. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate before zooming in. She held his gaze, steady and unflinching. Maybe the real problem isn't my jokes, Andy, she added, her voice soft but sure. It's that they remind people what used to feel safe. The tension had reached a breaking point, and Andy knew it. His voice softened, the edges smoothing over with forced calm. Look, he said, raising his hand slightly. I'm not attacking you. Leanne's smile returned, faint but unmistakably sharp. You just keep swinging and calling it conversation, she said. That line hung in the air longer than either of them expected. Andy tried to chuckle it off, but it sounded hollow, even to him. He glanced at his cards, then back at her, realizing he'd lost the easy rhythm that usually kept his guests off balance. Leanne leaned forward, elbows resting on the arm of her chair. You think honesty has an agenda, Andy, she said, her tone gentler now, almost reflective. It doesn't. It just has consequences. For the first time all night, Andy didn't have a comeback. His face softened, just slightly, like the performer in him had stepped back and the man behind the show was finally listening. Leanne didn't push. She didn't gloat. She simply added, quieter this time, maybe you don't need to understand my story. Just stop assuming it's about you. Both Andy and Leanne now had forced smiles on their faces. The mood had shifted from confrontation to something that looked, at least on the surface, like civility. Andy's voice regained its familiar rhythm as he introduced the next segment. Light questions, pre-written jokes, harmless chatter. Leanne played along, laughing about her husband's snoring and how her kids treat the laundry room like a haunted house. The audience laughed too, grateful for the change in tone. But beneath the laughter there was still that hum, the quiet aftershock of something that hadn't really settled. Andy leaned back, swirling his drink, pretending to relax. So, Leanne, he said with a grin that was all teeth, you still believe men should fix the garage while women do the cooking? The audience gave a half-hearted laugh. They could tell where this was headed. Leanne's smile stayed soft, but her eyes sharpened. Only if you believe sarcasm counts as journalism, she said sweetly. The studio erupted with a mixture of laughter and gasps. Even Andy blinked, caught between amusement and irritation. He forced a laugh, raising his glass in mock surrender. Well, he said, his tone tight, I guess I'll drink to that. Please do, Leanne replied smoothly. You'll need it for what's coming next. Her words were playful on the surface, but her tone wasn't. It was a warning, quiet and deliberate. The crowd laughed weakly. The laughter had barely faded when Andy leaned forward again, eyes narrowing just enough to tell the room that the truce was over. His tone turned sharp, his words deliberate. "You've said before that traditional values are under attack," he said. "Who's attacking them, Leanne?" Leanne didn't flinch. Her posture stayed calm, her voice steady. "Anyone who turns love into a debate topic," she replied. Andy tilted his head, smirking. "That sounds like a dodge." Her expression hardened. "No," she said quietly. "That's a boundary." Andy tried to cut in, but she didn't give him the chance. Her hand lifted slightly, firm but composed. "And I need you to stop right there." The room froze. The audience gasped, an instinctive reaction to something that didn't usually happen on late-night TV. Andy Cohen, the man who'd made a career out of pushing people too far, had just been told to stop. Andy blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" he said, trying to recover. Leanne leaned forward, her voice low but cutting through the silence like a blade. "You don't listen to women like me, Andy. You analyze us. You dress our lives up as cliches to make your audience feel clever." He straightened in his chair, defensive. "That's not fair," she interrupted, calm but unyielding. "Neither is mockery dressed as curiosity." The audience didn't move. Even the crew behind the cameras seemed frozen in place. Andy's grin had vanished completely. Leanne's tone wasn't angry. It was certain. "See, Andy," she added softly, "you call it a conversation. But what you really want is a confession. I'm not here to give you one." He stared at her, searching for a comeback, but nothing came. The silence stretched long enough to make everyone in the studio realize the same thing. The interview was no longer his show. It was hers. Andy adjusted the stack of cue cards in front of him, forcing a grin that looked more like a grimace. The cameras were still rolling, but the warmth was gone. Every move he made felt like damage control. "So," he said carefully, trying to reel the moment back in, "you see yourself as a voice for traditional America?" Leanne's eyes met his, calm but unflinching. "No," she said, "I'm a voice for my America. The one that still believes decency doesn't need translation." The crowd went quiet. Andy's smirk faltered again. That line landed like a stone dropped in still water, rippling outward, impossible to ignore. He gave a polite laugh, the kind hosts give when they've lost control but don't want anyone to notice. "Well," he said, "we'll have to leave it there." But Leanne wasn't finished. She stood, slow and deliberate, the mic cord tugging slightly as she moved. "I came here to talk about laughter," she said, her voice steady, cutting through the studio haze. "You turned it into a trial. So I'll leave you with this. Comedy is how we heal. You just proved why we need it." For a moment, all anyone could hear was the soft click of her mic as she unclipped it. She placed it neatly on the table, gave Andy a polite nod, and turned toward the exit. Andy tried to say something, maybe a closing line, maybe a joke. But nothing came out. The cameras stayed on her as she walked off, heels clicking against the studio floor, each step echoing louder than anything he could have said. The applause never came, only silence, and the sound of a man realizing, too late, that he'd just lost control of his own show. If you thought this was just another talk show interview, think again. Leanne Morgan didn't just walk off that stage. She walked straight into a national conversation about honesty, humor, and respect. One quiet Southern voice took on late-night television's sharpest tongue, and one without raising hers. What do you think? Was Andy pushing for truth or just pushing too far? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more explosive moments in Real Talk Showdowns.